When Mouse saw them, his walking suddenly became harder. His shoes seemed to stick to the sidewalk and his legs got heavy. He felt as if he were walking underwater. He pulled down his jacket, smoothed his hair, hitched up his pants, and kept his hands busy in order to keep attention from his slow, heavy feet. He pulled at his earlobe, wiped his nose, zipped up his jacket higher. Foolishly, he thought of the 118 little people in his father's dreams. He wished they would appear, lift him and carry him away. "So long, Hammerman!" they would cry as they hurried him to safety. Mouse kept walking, and the three of them met in front of the Rialto by the boarded up booth where Mouse used to buy tickets to the Sunday science fiction special. Mouse finished working the zipper on his jacket and pulled his cuffs down. He said to Hammerman, I was sick yesterday. I had to go home, but I'm here now." It came out in a rush. Mouse hoped that he answered it so quickly that Hammerman didn't hear it. It was important that this one thing be said while he was still able to talk. "He still looks a bit sick to me, don't he, to you?" the boy in the black sweatshirt said, smiling. "Of course, he looks better than he's gonna look." Mouse didn't say anything. He was still trying to steel himself for the battle. The only thing he knew about fighting, he realised now, was that if you put your thumbs inside your fist and hit somebody hard with your hand like that, then you could break your thumb. He rearranged his hands, which he had instinctively folded, with the thumbs inside. He cleared his throat, wondering if he was supposed to say something else. He had had so little experience in fighting that he did not know how to fight of this kind, and a range fight would actually start. He remembered seeing a fist fight in an old silent movie on television one time, and the opponents had lifted their fists at the same moment, in the same position, and they'd circled each other in a set pattern. Still, he couldn't imagine this fight starting, not in that way or any other. He could only imagine the ending. The boy in the black sweatshirt jerked his head at Hammerman, and he said to Mouse, "He don't like anybody writing things about him." Mouse was so nervous, he thought perhaps the boy had been talking to him for hours. He wasn't certain of anything. "I know." The boy in the black sweatshirt nodded at Hammerman again. He said, "He wants you to know real good." The sun went behind a cloud, and it was suddenly dim beneath the marquee. Mouse couldn't see for a minute. He'd been looking at the boy in the sweatshirt while he was talking, and now the boy was silent. All Mouse could see was the whiteness of his smile. Mouse looked back at Hammerman. For a moment, he couldn't see him clearly either. Hammerman's face was a pale circle in the darkness, like the children's faces in the hospital ward, lit up by the light from Mouse's flashlight. Then, abruptly, everything snapped into focus. Hammerman's face was so clear, there seemed to be nothing between Mouse and Hammerman, not even air. They could have been up high in the altitude area where air thins and even distant points come into focus. Hammerman hadn't made a move that Mouse could see. He was still standing with his hands at his side, his feet apart. But his body had lost its relaxed look, and it was ready in a way that Mouse's body would never be. Mouse raised his fist. His thumbs were carefully outside, pointing upward, so that he appeared to be handling invisible controls of some sort. Then he saw Hammerman's fist coming towards him, the knuckles like pale pecans, and at the same time, Mouse saw Hammerman's eyes, pale but also very bright. Then Hammerman's fist slammed into his stomach. Mouse doubled over and staggered backward a few steps. He thought for a moment that he was going to fall to the ground, just sit down like a baby who had lost his balance. He didn't. And after a second, he straightened and came towards Hammerman. He threw out his right hand. He didn't see Hammerman's fist this time, but he felt it in his stomach again. It was so hard that Mouse made a strangled noise. It was as if he'd eaten breakfast. There would have been sugar pops all over the sidewalk from that blow. Choking, coughing, he staggered all the way back and hit the side of the theatre where pictures of man-made monsters used to be posted. He stayed there for a minute, bent over his stomach waiting for his strength to return. He could almost feel the old favourites, Gorgo, Mothra, Godzilla, waiting behind him. He tried to pull himself forward. For a minute, he felt he had become glued to the theatre, plastered there like a picture of monsters. Then he came free and took 3 heavy steps towards Hammerman. Gorgo had walked like this. Mouse thought of how Gorgo's feet had crushed whole buildings with his same heavy steps. His own feet could barely lift the weight of a pair of trainers. Mouse's hands were up. He threw the invisible controls forwards and hit nothing. Then he felt a sharp, stinging blow on his breastbone. He hadn't seen that one coming either. He put out his fist to ward off blows again rather than to land them. And then Hammond's fist was in his face. It landed somehow on his nose and mouth at the same time. And then there was another blow directly on his nose. Mouse's nose began to gush blood. The blood seemed to be coming from everywhere, not just his nose. Mouse wiped his face with one hand. Quickly, anxiously, he got his hands back in position. He threw the right control forward. Suddenly he couldn't see, and he wiped his hand over his eyes, then he wiped his nose and got set. He was leaning forward now, pressing his knees together to steady them. The blood from his nose was splattering on the sidewalk. He waited, wondering how long he could continue to hold his position. "You had enough yet?" he heard Hammerman shout. "No, he hasn't had enough yet," the boy said in the black sweatshirt said. "He's still standing." "You had enough," Hammerman said again. Hammerman's voice seemed to be coming from somewhere far away, but the voice wasn't asking the right question, Mouse thought. It seemed simply sudden. He saw it was now as an old-fashioned matter of honour. He, Mouse, had dishonoured Marv Hammerman, and now Hammerman had to be the one to say this, so his honour was restored. It was one of those things that didn't already become absolutely clear until the last minute, and then becomes so clear it dazzles the mind. Mouse could hear Dick Filani's voice explaining honour and knighthood to the English class. He could hear Eddie saying, "Ask me anything you want about honour, Mr. Steen, and I'll tell you." It was the odd thing, but he, Mouse, who had felt honour, who had been run through with it like a sword, couldn't say a word about it. He looked at Hammerman, squinting at him, and he said, "If you have." "If he has?" the boy in the black sweatshirt cried. "Man, he can keep going like this all morning." There was a long pause, and Mouse suddenly feared he was going to start to cry. He couldn't understand why he should want to cry now, when it was almost over. The worst thing that could happen now was a big final blow, the knockout punch that would leave him unconscious in the shadow of the tall building. He could even take that only if he did not start to cry. Hammond lifted one hand and opened it a little, as if he was releasing something. It was a strange gesture, and it seemed to Mouse the kind of gesture a dancer might try to make, or a painter might try to make to paint a picture. He imagined a small statue, bronze on a round pedestal, of Marv Hammerman with a partially raised open hand. "Go on." "What?" "Go on." Mouse wiped the back of his nose with the back of his hand and said, "Thank you." The boy in the black sweatshirt leaned back and hollered, "Woo-hee! You're welcome!" Mouse passed them, holding his hand over his nose. The boy in the sweatshirt laughed again. It was a loud, explosive laugh, and the boy spun around to watch Mouse walk away. "Wait! You're most certainly welcome. Come back any time." Mouse turned the corner and kept walking. Tears were in his eyes now, and he could not see where he was going. It was, he thought, the gesture that had weakened him. The careless ease of that open hand. Mouse couldn't seem to get that out of his mind. He made his way down the sidewalk with his eyes closed. He thought suddenly that if he could see where he was going, it would probably not be down 4th Street at all. He was probably walking across some dusty foreign field. If he could look up, he would not see the tops of buildings, the flat blue sky with a jet trail drawn across it. He would see gold and scarlet tournament flags snapping in the wind. There would be plumes and trumpets and horses in bright trappings. Honour would be a simple thing again, and so vital that people could talk of it wherever they went. He felt as if a vanished age had risen up to a huge wave and washed over him. Then he smelled the dry, starchy smell, and he knew he was passing the laundry. He stopped and he wiped his hand across his eyes and his nose to clear them. He stepped again against the wall, and he opened the door into an apartment building where he didn't know anybody. He sank down against the steps on the wall. With a sigh, he hung his head and he pinched his nose shut. His nose was still bleeding, and he saw that now, and he noticed the other damage. His upper lip was bleeding and it was starting to swell. His stomach hurt so bad, it might be weeks before he would be able to eat again. He couldn't bend over any further without feeling the pain of his breastbone. He looked at the watch. It was 10:13. Well, he thought wildly, at least I didn't break my thumbs. The end of chapter 9.